What's up, YouTube? It is your boy, JB, and I am here today with the review for Greenleaf, Season 5, Episode 8, which is also known as the series finale, and it was titled Behold. You guys, Greenleaf. I don't know which show I was more sad about leaving Greenleaf or How to Get Away with Murder. I actually think it's like super duper equal. I think it's equal to me because I loved How to Get Away with Murder as much as I loved Greenleaf. But you guys, without further ado, let's go ahead and just jump into this episode review, shall we? All right, you guys. So the episode, it picks up where last week's episode left off, with May in the bed with Bishop, who had a stroke. And you guys, Bishop, he died. I had saw it coming for a while. I'm like, I think Bishop was gonna die, but I wasn't ready to say that. I really wasn't ready to say that Bishop was gonna die, but he died. So then we do see Grace. So Grace is talking to Sophia about these pictures that she sent to Dante. And, she's like, why didn't you tell me? And Sophia was like, well, it wasn't that big of a deal. And Grace said, it is a big deal because you're thinking about not going back to that, going back to Hampton. So then Grace's phone rings and Sophia says, get it. She says, no, we're talking. She says, go ahead and get it. She says, it's fine. So then Grace answers the phone, and it is a lady named by the name of Anne, who offered Grace a job at 2020 a few years ago. But she had the family issues with Faith and actually just with the family in general. So the woman says, are those issues still there? She says, they've cleared up. She says, well, can you be in New York? Because she still wants Grace to come out there and be on 2020. So, Grace is talking to her, and as she's talking to her, Lady May comes in, and she says, you know what, Anne, I'm going to have to call you back. So then, we see everyone, and they are around Bishop in the bed, and everyone is just, crying their hearts out. Even I was crying my heart out. Like, I literally was crying. I'm like, oh my God, not Bishop. Like, this is just something that I did not see. Well, I saw it. I just didn't want to believe it. Put it that way. So then, we see them as they are burying Bishop, and I'm like, oh my God, it's real. Like, Bishop is actually gone. Like, oh my God, Bishop is gone. Can't believe we saying that Bishop is gone. The Bishop is gone. Bishop is gone. But let's move on. If we can. This thing is really tripping today. All right. So, after, we bury Bishop, we see the family, even, I'm going to actually call her by her name today, Carissa. So we see Carissa, she's there with Winky, and, they're walking back to the house. Now, Lady May is walking with Jacob, and Carissa is right behind her, and Lady May reaches her hand out to Carissa. I'm like, oh, wow. But, in this time, you don't want to be ugly to family, because despite what we all think about Carissa, how we feel about Carissa, Carissa was once family. So, in this time of need, families should come together. So, at the house, where everybody's sitting at the table, and there's an empty chair where Bishop sat at the head. And, everybody's just reminiscing about, Bishop. Because AJ was like, it's hard, he can't believe that, he can miss somebody so much that he barely knew. But, Bishop had that effect on people. And then, Grace is talking about, when she first came back and, Bishop told her she was going to church. And, a conversation that they had with each other. So then Marisol comes in and she tells Lady May that there's a phone call for her. So she gets up, go take the phone call, and Jacob like, do you need me to come with you, Mama? She says, no, it's okay. And then AJ said that, Even if it takes him 10 years, however long it takes him, he's gonna build that car. So then, Lady May goes in to take the phone call, and it's Misty. And Misty told her that, she and the rest of the deacons, with the exception of Connie Sykes with that terrible wig, they have been talking and they want for Lady May to come to the church this Sunday and, lead worship and honor the bishop. And Lady May didn't say anything, but I'm pretty sure she's gonna go. So next we see Noah and AJ. We see it at a house. It's a nice house where it says, "Is this an expensive house?" He says, "It can be." She says, "Do you have a job?" He says, "Yeah, I actually have a job. I'm the director of something that." He's the director of something. I don't know what the hell he was. I didn't take it down. But he has a job. So, Noah, he says, "Oh, well, Grace, with your mama giving Tara the house, if you need a place to stay, we got you." So then AJ's on the phone in the background, and he comes over, and he tells Grace and Noah that his lab work is doing good. So I'm like, wow, it took to the end of the season for us to see a semblance of some kind of I don't even know what I want to say when it comes to AJ. It just took us to this point to actually see something good in AJ. I'll say that much. So then, AJ and Grace are getting ready to leave the house. So she gets a phone call from Darius. And, she's talking about seeing Darius later. And then when she hangs up the phone with him, AJ says, "Was that Darius?" She says, "Yeah, that was Darius." He says, "So when am I going to get to meet this Darius?" She says, "Soon." He says, "Me and him might have a little conversation." And she was like, "Oh, so you're trying to protect, good old mom here?" He's like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Oh my God." Again, it took us to the ending part of the series for AJ to be nice to people, and especially Grace, as much as she has done for him. It was nice to see, I will say that. However, I would definitely say it was nice to see that. But let's move on. All right. Next, we see Jacob. So Jacob is playing chess. And I put in my notes Clam, but again, I'm going to call her by her name, Carissa. Carissa comes in, she was putting Winky to sleep. And, they're talking about, the fact of if Winky's going to really understand or grasp the fact that Grandpa is not coming back. Carissa doesn't think he will. I can't think of how old Winky is, but oh, excuse me, y'all. I don't think I really grasped what death was until I was in my double digits. Because if I was in my single digits, I did not understand it. Yeah, in single digits, I didn't understand. Double digits, that's when I started to understand death a little more, that I would never see the loved one again. So, they could be right. So then, Carissa tells Jacob that, well, she actually asked him, "Can I leave Winky here for a few days while I go look for a place to stay?" He says, "Sure." And, she says, he notices that she has on her, her jacket from work. She says, "Well, it is my school." She says, "When I said shared custody, I meant shared custody." I'm like, wow. Wow. Like, wow. I can't believe that even in these last few episodes that I'm starting to, kind of like Charity, AJ, and even Carissa. So Carissa, she was getting ready to leave, and Jacob tells her, he's like, "Well, you don't have to go. You can stay." She's like, "No, I need to go get a hotel room." She says, "I don't want to confuse Winky, and I don't want to confuse you." And then she tells Jacob, that this divorce, this is their happily ever after. And I was just like, oh, I could not even hate her. I couldn't hate Carissa in that moment. Like, I couldn't. It's crazy. It really is. It took for the bishop to die for me to not hate Carissa, AJ, and Charity as much as I have in the past. Wow, crazy. It's just really interesting to me. But let's move on. All right, so then we see Zora, Sophia, and AJ. So Zora and Sophia are talking about what death must feels like because the Bible doesn't really say much about it. And that is a question that I've always wondered as well myself. Like, what is it? What I mean, in eventually I'm gonna know what death feels like, but I do wonder what is life like after death. Like I always wondered that. Like, what happens to the soul? I know we're told you either go to heaven or hell, but the real question is what happens. Do you see past loved ones come? It's an interesting question. It's an interesting question, and I like the different theories. I kind of understand. I kind of feel I'm on the spectrum of what Sophia said and what Zora said. And AJ, he was just trying to figure out what it is to live. And I'm like, we're starting to see a different side of AJ, and I'm actually liking him. But I'm on the side of I'm it's kind of like when it comes to what Zora said, like you just go to sleep and you basically never wake up. But it is a good question to ask. What is death like? So then we do see Darius and Grace. So Grace tells Darius, actually, because her phone was ringing, and she's ignoring Anne. And she tells him that Anne has offered her a job. Well, she's offering her something. And he's like, so what do you have to lose? She says, my family needs me here, AJ and Sophia. And I'm thinking to myself, but AJ and Sophia are both grown. So Grace, it is time for you to once again live your life. You came back home for a purpose. And I feel like you have served that purpose and it's time for you to move on. So she says, well, what about us? He says, what about us? She says, are we adults? He says, if you get a job offer in New York, I will accompany you. She said, you'll follow me to New York. He says, I didn't say I'll follow you. I said, I will accompany you. I'm like, oh, look at Darius. That's real love right there. That is real love. So then we see Lady May. So Lady May is talking to, Grace, Jacob, and Charity. And she's telling them that, Misty them wants her to come back and speak at the church to honor the bishop. And they said, well, are they asking you to come back permanently? She says, no, this is just a speaking arrangement. And so, everyone sits there and also once again, Grace gets a call from, Anne, but she ignores it. So then over at Calvary, we see Lady May and Corinne. And, Corinne takes her into the bishop's office. And, Lady May said, please leave me, Corinne. Corinne thought she did something wrong, but I don't think she did anything wrong. And also, Corinne wanted to talk about Bishop. And Lady May was like, no, Corinne, let's not do that. This week, we're not talking about him. We're going to say that and talk about him on Sunday. And, it's still surreal that the bishop is gone. Like, I'm having a hard time believing that the bishop is gone, but he's gone. He is gone. All right, guys, shall we move on? All right, you guys. So next we see Jacob. So Jacob is over at Tara's, little church, and she's handing out food to the, her parishioners. And Tara is talking about Bishop's death, and she can't help but feel like she had a part in his death, with all the added stress that they brought onto him with this whole situation with this will. I'm not gonna blame Tara. Actually, I'm not gonna blame anybody. I think that it was Bishop's time to go. So I'm not going to place blame on anybody. I'm not going to place blame on Tara. I'm not going to place blame on Carissa, Jacob, nobody. I'm not going to place any blame. I think that when he finally let everything out, put everything out in the open, that cleared his conscience, and that allowed him to be able to, move on into the next stage of his life, which is death. So I'm not going to place blame on anybody. So then, Jacob tells her that nobody is holding any grudges towards them, and he says, well, my mom says, can we hold off on this for another 3 months? And she says, sure. But then she also says, you know what? Let's just call it even. And I'm like, call it even? I knew she didn't mean that. My daddy died, so your daddy died. Let's call it even. And I knew what she meant. Like, everything is done. It's in the past. Let's just move forward into a brighter future. And I was like, oh my. At that point, I really was about to. I think I did cry because I was like, oh my God. I had been thinking the worst of Tara. To be quite honest with you guys, I had been thinking the worst of Tara. And then in this moment, in this instinct, it made me see that no, Tara is who she says she is. And like, I've been skeptical of Tara this whole entire time, but Tara James is who she says she is. And I'm like, oh my God. So then we see Grace. So Grace has Aaron over, and she's created a trust for AJ and Sophia with the money that Lionel left her. So then Grace is talking to Aaron about the whole thing with Ann, and because Ann was calling her again, and he was like, "Is that something that you need to get? Like, what's up with that?" And she was like, I don't know what to do. Like, I can't answer the phone until I don't have the heart to tell her no. And she was like, do you have any advice? And he tells her, he gives her some advice, and he tells her, if you can't say no, you won't say no. If you can't say no, you'll answer the phone and tell her, but don't let that be a reason for you not to answer that phone. So then we see May, and she is in her room and she's looking through the Bible and she's trying to decide what she wants to preach on Sunday. And then Jacob comes into the room with her and he tells her that Tara said to keep the house. And Lady May said the same thing that I just said a few minutes ago. It appears that Tara James is exactly who she says she is. An upstanding part. She's nothing like Wretched Rochelle, which I'm gonna retire that name and just call her Rochelle Cross, because even Rochelle, showed a different side of herself in last week's episode. So, wow. A lot of people had a lot of people have had turning points in this last season. I mean, there are still some unanswered questions, but I think, like with How to Get Away with Murder, I think they did excellent in this series finale. But let's move on, you guys, and wrap this episode up. All right, you guys, and then to wrap the episode up, so it is Sunday, and it is, Lady May getting ready to, preach. We see Tara and James at the church, and Jacob's like, "You're here?" She's like, "Yeah, it's all over my favorite radio station about come on down to Greenleaf and get a seat." He says, "Well, what about your congregation?" She says, "I brought them here with me." He says, "You did?" She's like, "Yes." And she says, "I also heard that you have you love to help the homeless as well." He says, "Yeah, I do. How do you know that?" She says, "Oh, Tasha told me that." I'm retiring everybody's names at this point. Everybody's names are retired. So she said Tasha told her that. And she says, maybe the three of us can work together sometime. I'm like, I don't know about that. Because I saw a little bit of chemistry between Jacob and Tara. So I'm like, ooh, you and your sister-in-law gonna be fighting over Jacob, who's about to be single. All right. So then we hear Charity, she's singing, and then Lady May got up there and did that sermon, Make Me New. You could have fooled me. You could have told me that I was actually in a church house listening to Lady May preach. It's so sad that this show never got nominated for an Emmy because Lynn Whitfield does an amazing job. Like the way she acts on the show, she has acted her ass off. Like Lynn Whitfield deserves an Emmy nominate, at least a nomination for his role of Lady May, like 1,000, like literally. So, while Lady May is preaching, Sophia actually turned over to Grace and told her that your work here is done. I'm like, oh my God. It's just really sad. And, Lady May, she filled everybody in that house with the Holy Spirit. Hell, she even filled me with the Spirit. Like, I got up and I felt, I had a praise break for a minute because I'm like, that just felt so real to me. So she asked anybody who wants to come up and get saved to come up. And y'all, when AJ got up, I was like, oh my Lord. Bless him, Jesus. Bless him. Like, that's really when I caught the Spirit. When AJ got up there, like, that is when I caught the Spirit. I literally caught the Spirit at that point. So after the service was over with, Lady May was back in the office, and Grace comes in and she says, I overheard Misty telling some of the new people that were here today that, you'll be preaching here this next Sunday, and a Sunday after that, and a Sunday after that. So May has the church back. And I couldn't be any happier. I really couldn't be. And May says, well, you're here, so that must mean you need to talk to me about something. And she says, yes, Mama, it's time for me to go. And May was like, no, Grace, like, I need you now that your father is gone. And Grace was like, no, Mama, this is your time, and this is also my time, and we have to trust him. So then we do see Grace, and Grace is leaving for New York. You guys, Charity actually made me, like, my heart, like, really soften for Charity. When she told Grace that you are my sister and that I love you, I'm like, oh my God, like, we have not heard Charity say that. And it was just like, oh my God. And then, Lady May, she told Grace, thank you. And Grace said, thank you for what? She says, for coming back and sowing seeds of discord in my peace, or whatever she said in the beginning of the first episode. And you guys, that was the end of Greenleaf. Can't believe I'm saying that that's the end of Greenleaf. So we still don't know what the spinoff is based off of. There's a new series that they're going to be bringing on called Delilah. Don't know much about that either. But you guys, as far as Greenleaf goes, this has been an amazing show. I've enjoyed seeing, people of color, people that look like me on television in lead roles. It is amazing when you see that. That is something so amazing to see. It's just people that look like you on television. And my hat is off to Oprah and, the writer of the show, everybody. My hats are off to you guys. You guys did an amazing job with this show. Whew. Oh, man. I do feel the same way that I felt when How to Get Away with Murder went off. But you guys, that is going to do it for me with this episode review of Greenleaf. So, you guys, until we get to the spin-off series, do me a solid favor, you guys. Take care of yourselves. Stay safe out there. Stay hydrated, and I will catch you guys later.